I pulled my first carburetor when I was 17 years old, out of a 1968 Ford pickup sitting on blocks in my uncle's backyard. He handed me a flathead screwdriver and walked away, and that was my first lesson as a mechanic. 22 years later, I still work on engines every single day, and for the past 3 years, I've been watching something I cannot get out of my head. There is a group of people quietly buying up old carburetors across the country. Not collectors, not restorers, but engineers, electronics professionals, and some very smart, very informed drivers. They're hitting swap meets, salvage yards, and online classifieds, and some of them have 10, 20, 30 units stockpiled in airtight bins in their garage. Rochester Quadrajets, Holly double pumpers, Carter AFBs, Autolite 2-barrels, all from the 1960s, 70s, and early 80s. And here's the question I'm answering today. Why? What do they know that you don't? I'll give you the answer in one sentence. These people are preparing for an electromagnetic pulse event, an EMP. An electromagnetic pulse is a short, intense burst of electromagnetic energy that can come from a high-altitude nuclear detonation or from an extreme solar event called a coronal mass ejection. You've probably never heard of the Carrington Event of 1859, when a natural electromagnetic surge took down the entire telegraph network across North America and Europe within hours. Telegraph offices caught fire. Operators received electric shocks through their equipment, and that grid was a toy compared to what we have today. The U.S. EMP Commission has stated plainly that a major EMP event could collapse the power grid and critical infrastructure across large portions of the country. Every vehicle built after roughly 1982 has between 50 and 80 electronic control modules: engine control unit, transmission module, ABS module, airbag module. A strong EMP destroys them all simultaneously. The car stops in the middle of the road permanently, not fixable in any normal scenario. But a car with a mechanical carburetor and a points ignition system, it keeps going. Here's the point I cannot fully explain in this video. There's a technique that determines which carburetors are still installable after 10 years in storage, and which ones silently become useless without you ever knowing. I've documented it in the auto research, link in the description. But let me show you first why the cutoff year matters, and what a truly EMP-resistant vehicle actually requires. Most drivers assume carburetor cars are a 1950s thing. That's wrong, because Rochester Quadrajets were still rolling off production lines in the mid-1980s, and certain Ford trucks and Chevy Blazers kept carburetors into the early and mid-80s. But here is what 90% of people miss entirely. The carburetor alone is not enough. The ignition system has to be mechanical too. Points, condenser, distributor, ignition coil, no electronic ignition module, no transistorized control unit. The fully mechanical vehicle needs 4 things: a carburetor with no electronic choke solenoids, a points and condenser ignition, a mechanical fuel pump driven off the camshaft, and no electronic relays in the core functions. Vehicles built before approximately 1975 typically meet all 4 of these requirements. 75 to early 80s often still qualify. After that, rarely. Ford switched to electronic ignition on most models in 1974. GM followed within a year or two. That is the real cutoff line, not the 90s, not the 80s. Why are smart drivers buying now? Because good condition carburetors are becoming genuinely scarce on the salvage market, and because NASA and NOAA put the odds of a Carrington-level solar event at around 12% within any 10-year window. 12% sounds small, but that is the same probability level that insurance actuaries use to justify keeping billions in reserve. And military EMP weapons are documented in defense doctrine across multiple nations. Not science fiction. Stop. I need to be honest with you right here. What I just showed you could be the difference between having working transportation and being completely stranded when the grid goes down. That's what I can show you in a YouTube video. But there are 3 guides I will not be showing here. First, the complete technical checklist for every carburetor type, with exact steps for long-term storage, so yours is still installable in 10 years instead of cracked, gummed up, and useless. Second, the 3 most common mistakes people make when buying used carburetors at swap meets, the ones that turn a $20 find into a $200 mistake you cannot use. Third, the critical detail that 90% of buyers ignore, which additional parts you must store alongside the carburetor, because without them, the carburetor alone does absolutely nothing. If you only watch this video, you have the surface. The auto research shows you the full depth, plus oil changes, brakes, battery, tires, and every mechanical core system. One access, all the guides, permanent. Link in the description. But now let me walk you through the actual list. Vehicle number 1, the VW Beetle, pre-1975. The Beetle runs on an air-cooled 4-cylinder boxer engine with no cooling system, no engine management computer, and in original form, mechanical carburetor, points ignition, mechanical fuel pump, completely EMP resistant. The Solex 30 picked and 34 picked are factory originals on most models. Weber and Empire replacements are still produced new today for $35 to $50, and used Solex units run $40 to $90 at swap meets. One critical rule: the 30 picked is not the 34 picked, and each version has different jets and float specs. Identify your engine code number first, then buy. If you stayed with me this far, you understand what this is really about. Is this summary enough for you? Or do you want the complete list of every carburetor type, part numbers, current sources, and storage specs? The auto research shows you what I cannot show in any video. All vehicle types, oil changes, brakes, battery, and everything still coming. Link below. Now let's keep going down the list. Vehicle number 2, the Ford F-Series truck, pre-1975. The Ford F-100 and F-150 from the late 1960s through approximately 1974 are among the most widely available EMP-resistant vehicles in the country, with mechanically simple inline 6 and small block V8 variants, abundant parts, and carburetors priced between $30 and $80 used. The 300 cubic inch inline 6 in particular has a reputation for running 500,000 miles with basic maintenance. Vehicle number 3, the Jeep CJ Series pre-1980. The CJ5 and CJ7 from the 1960s through the late 70s have carbureted engines with four-wheel drive capability. In a post-EMP scenario where roads are blocked with dead vehicles, four-wheel drive is not a luxury. It is the difference between getting through and getting stuck. Look for CJ models. Before 1979 for the cleanest points ignition examples. Carburetor for the 258 inline 6, $30 to $70. Vehicle number 4, the International Harvester Scout, 1961 to 1980. Less known than the Jeep, but regarded by mechanics as more durable, with a carbureted engine, simple electrical system, and dedicated supplier network still active online. Used carburetors, $40 to $90. Vehicle number 5, the Toyota Land Cruiser and Hilux, pre-1985. The carbureted Hilux with the 22R engine is a legend in long-term reliability with a global enthusiast network behind it, easy to rebuild and widely available parts. Used carburetor, $35 to $80. Vehicle number 6, the Mercedes-Benz diesel W123, late 70s to mid-80s. The OM616 and OM617 engines run on compression alone with no electronic control unit and no electronic ignition. This vehicle keeps running after an EMP because there is almost nothing electronic to destroy, and spare glow plugs, plus a mechanical relay cost under $30 total. Vehicle number 7, the Chevrolet CK pickup, pre-1975. The classic Chevy square body truck in its pre-electronic form is one of the most abundant EMP-resistant vehicles in the United States, with a small block 350 V8 and Rochester Quadrajet carburetor rebuilt by mechanics for 60 years. Parts exist everywhere. Carburetors rebuilt professionally for under $100, new replacements for $50 to $80, and clean examples still show up at farm auctions and estate sales for $2,000 to $5,000 in running condition. The Rochester Quadrajet was used on essentially every GM V8 application from the mid-1960s through the early 1980s, making it the single most widely available American carburetor you can stockpile. One important check: some later Quadrajets have an electronic mixture control solenoid added for emissions. Look for an electrical connector on the carburetor body. If it has one, skip it and find an earlier clean unit. Vehicle number 8, the Dodge Power Wagon and early Ram Charger, pre-1975. The Power Wagon, in its original 60s and early 70s configuration, is a purely mechanical truck built for extreme conditions. Carbureted V8, points ignition, mechanical everything. The early Ram Charger through approximately 1975 shares these characteristics. Harder to find than Ford or Chevy, but genuinely tougher in the field. Used carburetor, $40 to $85. Vehicle number 9, the Ford Diesel IDI, 1983 to 1994. This is the surprise on the list. The Ford's 6.9 and 7.3 liter international diesel engines used in F-Series trucks through 1994 are mechanically injected diesels with almost no electronic management, no ECU, no electronic ignition. The IDI Ford diesel survives an EMP in far better condition than any modern diesel. These trucks are still undervalued at auctions and salvage yards, and the spare parts package is simple: injection pump seals, glow plugs, and a set of injectors for under $200 total. 300,000 miles is considered low for one of these engines. 500,000 is not unusual with basic maintenance, which tells you something about what mechanically simple diesel engineering is capable of. Here is one more thing worth knowing about the IDI. The transmission that pairs with it in most of these trucks is the C6, an all-hydraulic automatic that has no electronics other than a neutral safety switch. The C6 is one of the toughest transmissions ever bolted behind an American V8, and it rebuilds with basic tools and commonly available parts. A truck with the IDI diesel and a C6 automatic is, from a mechanical complexity standpoint, almost identical to a truck from 1968. That is not a criticism. That is the point. Let me also say a word about the early diesel Mercedes, because the 123 series keeps coming up in conversations among people who take this seriously. The OM 6 17.5 cylinder engine is the better choice over the OM 6 16 4-cylinder if you can find it, because the 5-cylinder produces more torque and is easier to keep running under load. Both engines have mechanical injection pumps with no electronic fuel management, and both are still supported by a strong community of part suppliers in the United States. If you are not a diesel mechanic yourself, find one before you buy. Have the injection pump and glow plug system checked, because those are the two areas where deferred maintenance on these engines becomes expensive. A properly maintained W123 diesel with the 5-cylinder engine is one of the most durable vehicles ever built in the 20th century. On the subject of spark plug wires, this is one part that many people forget to include in their spare parts kit, and it matters. Spark plug wires on older vehicles are rubber-insulated conductors that degrade with age, heat, and ozone exposure. A set of wires left in storage for a decade can develop small cracks in the insulation that cause misfires under load. A replacement set of plug wires for most classic American engines costs between $15 and $35. Add them to your emergency kit. One last thought before the summary. The best spare parts are no good if you do not know how to use them. Consider learning the basic tune-up procedure for whatever vehicle you are preparing. Setting point gap and ignition timing on a points ignition distributor is a skill that takes about an hour to learn and another hour to practice. Once you know it, you can do it anywhere with a feeler gauge, a timing light, and basic hand tools. The complete basic tune-up toolkit for a points ignition vehicle, including a timing light, feeler gauge, and combination wrench set, runs between $60 and $90 at any auto parts store. That knowledge, combined with the spare parts, is what actually makes the preparation useful. Vehicle number 10, pre-1973 muscle cars, the Ford Mustang, Chevy Camaro, Dodge Charger, and Plymouth Roadrunner from the late 60s through approximately 1973 are carbureted points ignition vehicles with enormous parts ecosystems. A rebuilt Holly or Rochester for most of these engines runs $60 to $120. Brand new aftermarket carburetors from Holly or Edelbrock are under $200, and the parts supply for classic American muscle is better than almost any other vehicle on this list. That is the list of 10 vehicles. Now let's talk about the part most people never reach. What is the point of owning a carburetor if you store it wrong? There is no point? None. A carburetor is not a chunk of steel like a crankshaft. It is a precision instrument with rubber gaskets, brass needle valves, aluminum float bowls, and dozens of tiny fuel passages. Rubber gaskets harden and crack over time, even when the carburetor is not being used. Fuel passages oxidize from old residue left inside. The float needle valve can seize after years of sitting. Someone who buys a carburetor at a swap meet and drops it on a garage shelf will very likely have an unusable part in 3 to 5 years. Here's the core storage rule that every professional mechanic knows. Step 1, clean the carburetor completely before storing. Remove every trace of old fuel. Spray carburetor cleaner through every circuit and passage. Leave no residue inside. Step 2, inspect every rubber component before storing. Gaskets, O-rings, the accelerator pump diaphragm. Any hardening or cracking means you replace the rebuild kit before storage, not after you need it. Rebuild kits for most common American carbs cost $8 to $20. Step 3, pack it clean and airtight, wrapped in paper towels to absorb moisture, then sealed inside a heavy zip lock bag or vacuum-sealed bag with no air or moisture contact. Step 4, store it cool and dry in a temperature-stable location, not a damp basement with desiccant packets inside the storage bin. Done correctly, a properly stored carburetor lasts 15 to 20 years without degrading. But the carburetor alone is not a working ignition system. What good is a perfect carburetor if the points are worn and the condenser is bad? The complete emergency parts package for any mechanical ignition vehicle consists of, at minimum, 7 items. The carburetor cleaned and stored, a set of points sealed in original packaging, a replacement condenser, a replacement ignition coil, a fresh set of spark plugs matched to the engine, a distributor cap and rotor, and a mechanical fuel pump specific to the engine if you can source one. These 7 parts together, for most common American vehicles, cost between $40 and $120 total. Where do you find these parts? Swap meets are the first stop. Hershey in Pennsylvania, Pomona in California, Carlisle, dealers who have been accumulating old parts for 40 years, Carburetors for $15 to $50 in most cases. eBay and Facebook Marketplace are the second stop. Estate sales frequently appear with entire boxes of old parts from inherited garages, and $20 to $60 often gets you more than just the carburetor. Specialty rebuilders are the third stop. Companies that have operated continuously for decades, selling tested, rebuilt units with warranties for $80 to $150. Worth it for a guaranteed unit. Salvage yards are the fourth stop, increasingly less reliable for pre-1975 vehicles, but worth calling ahead with the exact year, make, model, and engine size. Should you buy a whole vehicle or just stockpile parts? My answer, both have value. A complete vehicle is the most reliable option. You can test it, verify it actually works, and know exactly what you have. Parts alone are the lower cost option. If you already own an older vehicle, storing the critical parts is straightforward and inexpensive. If you own a pre-1975 truck or car in reasonable condition, the decision is easy. Buy the emergency parts package for under $120 and store it. If you do not own such a vehicle, consider this. A running pre-1975 Ford F100 at a farm auction runs $2,000 to $4,000, plus the spare parts package for under $120 for a total under $4,500. A vehicle in EMP cannot permanently disable. Is any of this realistic? Solar storms are real, and they happen on a measurable schedule. The 1989 Quebec blackout was caused by a solar storm that knocked out power across a large portion of Canada for 9 hours. EMP as a tool of warfare is openly discussed in defense literature and documented in military doctrine across multiple nations. The question is not whether a major solar event occurs. The question is when. For between $40 and $120, you can make sure an older vehicle you already own has the critical spare parts to restart after an EMP takes out everything else on the road. That is not paranoia. It is the same logic as keeping a spare tire, jumper cables, or a fire extinguisher, not because you expect to need it today, because you will be glad you have it if you do. Here is the most important thing I will say in this entire video. Do not buy just any carburetor. Carburetors are not universal. Every engine has specific requirements, and the wrong application either will not fit or will run so poorly it is useless. The formula: identify your engine by its casting number or Vine engine code, research the correct carburetor type for that application, buy only units in mechanically sound condition, clean and pack properly, and stock the full ignition package alongside it. 5 steps, under $120, done. I have been a mechanic for over 20 years, and the drivers who have the fewest problems are never the ones with the most expensive vehicles. They are the ones who understand how their machine actually works. Subscribe to this channel if you want to keep learning what dealerships and shops will never tell you. New information every week that can save you hundreds of dollars and keep you moving when everyone else is standing still. Hit the bell so you don't miss anything. See you in the next video.